So the bill I want to propose is a bill that would reform kind of the current one that's already going on nationally. So I kind of want to persuade Ohio to propose a bill to reform this. So right now, Obama, as president, when Obama was president, he made a federal labeling standard for GMO foods, and this was not like a universal symbol, but like it just gave them options. They could put like an electronic label on there that you have to like scan on your phone to see if it was GMO free or not, or you could just put like a symbol on there, but it didn't really specify what. So kind of what I want to do is kind of persuade Ohio to like push for this in the state, so that nationally it could kind of like make a change there, which I'll talk about a little bit more. But basically to kind of make like one universal symbol that everybody uses instead of multiple different ones. So just kind of some background information on like what a GMO is. So they're genetically engineered food that's produced through an alteration of genetic material. This wouldn't occur within nature, obviously. It does have some negative effects like increased herbicide use, and it does have like an increased chance of allergy with people. And this is information from ABC News. So between 75 and 80% of the foods contain genetically engineered ingredients, and the FDA said that around the genetically engineered crops first entered the food supply around the 90s, and 93% of the planted soybeans are GMOs, and 88% of corn is. And then kind of just like generally like within the population, the Associated Press carried out a poll, and this said that around 66% of the public favors GMO labeling, and only 7% oppose. So the rest of them are kind of like indifferent to that. And that information is from an article called Mandatory GMO Labeling by Musicino. So kind of what pushed for this at a federal level was Vermont passed a GMO labeling mandate around 2015, the year, and companies got really angry about that, and they threatened to stop selling their products there because they had to change their labeling for Vermont only. And this kind of pushed for the national move for a food disclosure statement from Obama when he was president. So I have like a quote up here. When states have attempted to create labeling laws for GMOs, they are usually sued by the food industry. Some courts have ruled against some labeling requirements based on claims that corporations have a First Amendment right not to be compelled to state things about what is in their food that is not justified by legally valid government interests. So this kind of like brings up the issue between like the food companies and the states that was going on during this time. And there's like a lot of distrust between both like the food companies and the people kind of because of this whole issue. Because once like Vermont passed their GMO labeling law, they were obviously sued by companies like the Grocery Manufacturers Association and other ones like that. And then when this happened, Campbell's Soup kind of responded to it, and they decided to make all of their products labeled whether they're GMO or not. So this was the chief executive of Campbell's Soup who said this, and they said a state-by-state patchwork of laws could be incredibly costly, not only for a company but for the entire industry. That's why we want the federal government to come up with a national standard that is mandatory. So this kind of Vermont doing this kind of pushed for federal action because there were so many conflicts within it. So then obviously Obama as president kind of made the federal labeling standard. Like I said earlier, it required them to have either an electronic code, a text label, or some sort of symbol signifying if it contains GMO. But this obviously had a lot of issues with it, because if they don't have access to technology, you don't have access to find out if there's GMOs in the food you're eating, if that's what you want to know. So one of the problems I talked about with the First Amendment, with the freedom of speech between the food companies and the people and who would win out there, said that the food companies thought they should be able to choose since the GMOs are not currently recognized as bad for humans. And the FDA says they are like okay to eat and safe to eat as traditional crops. But however, both people want to know where their food is coming from regardless. And so according to these graphs I have they're from their consumer reports from the National Research Center. And this one shows the consumer preference for standards of genetically engineered foods. So a majority of people want to see them labeled. And then this one was specifically about salmon. So yeah, obviously from both of the graphs you can see that people are wanting to see what's in their food, regardless if it'll change, if they'll eat it or not. They just want to know what they're eating. So in addition to that too, trust with organic food has risen. and demand is growing for the non-GMO products. So this has worked in different areas of the world. I talked to someone who's part of the community food initiatives in Athens, Ohio, and they were talking about how they focus on bringing health-led food and avoiding GMOs to the community, and they do this through programs to kind of like preserve the food and like growth of crops and like the Appalachian Mountains and that kind of thing. So also Campbell Soup, like I said, they've been working on disclosing the presence of GMOs in their foods. Whole Foods Market, they require all of its products to have GMO labels, and this is a recent thing, so that'll be done by 2018. And the European Parliament adopted a regulation in 1997 requiring foods with GMOs to be labeled. Japan also has a labeling mandate, so it's not an uncommon thing to have a requirement for the GMO labels. And then this one was interesting to me. In Thailand, they've never really supported the use of GMOs in engineered food in general. The only type that's allowed are controlled pharmaceutical tests. They think that if they allowed the GMOs, it would threaten the smaller farmers who would not be able to compete with the higher technology with the GMOs and that kind of thing. So it would result in having to use like zoning and mixing natural and genetically modified plants. So even like without a GMO system too, Thailand is within the world's top 10 exporting countries. That information is from the last name stuff, but it's Sopsti. So basically, and Madeline Ostrander said this: there seems to be a communication gap between organic and conventional farmers, as well as between consumers and scientists, and it's time to close that gap. So, yeah, so just to kind of like sum everything up, I want Ohio to kind of push for this and for like a one symbol, a universal symbol that anyone can tell within their food products, so it makes everything easier for everyone else. And if that happens in Ohio, that could cause a chain reaction for something to happen at the national level.